The following program is rated T for teen for the use of tools and materials that can be harmful to unsupervised usage. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello everyone, Mr. Waugh here for Mr. Waugh Media, and yes, that is my actual name. And for today's episode, the Season 3 finale, we're going to do some Mordheim, City of the Damned. Welcome back to the show, everyone, and as I said, this is the Season 3 finale. I want to thank everyone so much for your continued support. I know it's been a little bit of time between the different episodes, between Mia not being here and myself working in film and television production. That's been incredible, but it has taken me away from my own personal projects. For that, I am sorry, but you guys have been incredible. We're now at 700 subscribers, and if we can get to 1,000, we can monetize the channel, so thank you guys for that. On top of it, 27,000 views. Thank you guys so much. Now on to the episode itself. This one's probably going to be about 30 or 40 minutes, depending how long it takes me in the editor's chair. I figure it's the finale, let's go big, let's do some cool stuff. And we're going to look at Mordheim, City of the Damned. For those that don't know, it's a fictitious city that was brought low by a comet that left nothing but ash and ruin in its wake. Now, don't let that, deter you. This is actually going to be a pretty straightforward build that you can take this template and run wild with it. As always, I'm just giving you the blueprints, and you can let your imagination run wild. Overall, it's a pretty basic build. There's just a lot more steps involved, but in the end, you're going to have some fantastic looking scenery. Let's get started.
Alright, so the very first thing that we're going to need is the base for these structures. And to start with, I'm going to make this one 6 inches wide by 10 inches long, cut out of some styrofoam sheet here. Now, I'm going to make several of these in different variants, but for this one in particular, if you're trying to copy what I'm doing, those will be the measurements. And of course, you have total control over what size you want this thing to be. Once that's out of the way, we're going to need 2 pieces of styrofoam, one that's going to be bolted to the base itself, and one for the structure. There is a method to my madness, so bear with me. Now, the longer one is going to be about 4 inches in width and about 5, maybe 6 inches in length. The shorter one is going to be 4.5 in width and only about 3 inches. You can play around with this. Again, the measurements are totally up to you, but if you're trying to follow at home, that's roughly what mine are going to be. Next up, we'll take the ruler and draw 2 very careful lines along each of the edges. That way, when we start doing our bricks, we'll have about 3 layers. Now, if you want to do more, obviously, help yourself, or if you only want to do 2 layers of bricks, it is a little bit easier, but for me, I've got to challenge myself a bit. So, once I have those 2 lines drawn, I basically have to go in with the pen and manually draw in each of the bricks. This can be very time-consuming, especially since we have 2 of these things, but yeah, just take your time, make sure it's nice and clean, and that's about it for this step. I think it's safe to say we can probably do a bit of a time lapse here. Once that is out of the way and all 4 edges are complete, we're now going to take the ruler and start putting them onto the top of the styrofoam as well. Now, for this one, let's actually whip out the ruler here just so I can give you a little bit more precise of a measurement. So it is about 1/2 of an inch in width for these bricks, and I'm going to do about 2 layers of this. Now, you can go all out and do even more if you like, but for me, I found the 2 was all that I really needed for this particular design. So we'll just keep sketching along here until we're satisfied and finished. You'll get something that looks a little bit like this. So this is the larger one. Here's the smaller one, and this is going to be used on the building itself, and the larger one will be used on the styrofoam base. Speaking of the base, we're now going to start working away on that one. So what I've done is cut a very thin piece of styrofoam here and chop them into tiny little bricks. We're going to need an absolute ton of these because we got to build an entire fence around this parameter. So yeah, start chopping. This is going to take a bit. Make sure your blade is nice and sharp. I always stress that in all my videos. There's nothing worse than working with a dull blade. You can see here, this is a pretty simple step overall. It's just time consuming. I mean, let's face it, the more and more complex this series has been getting, everything is time consuming. Let's be real with each other. Alright, so I got myself a little mountain of them here. We're going to do a time lapse. You can see I got a little bit more. Now we're going to start bolting everything into place. So here's the bigger piece that's going to get put into the corner. For this one in particular, other ones I put them in the middle. You're going to see at the end of this video I've made tons of them, so dealer's choice, as I've always said. Once that is firmly in place and we can start building the fence around it, we're basically just going to, well, one by one glue every single brick down. This is going to take a very long time, so here's a time lapse. You can see I've done one brick all the way around. Any of us that have built Lego before, I know you can probably sympathize with this. But it's going to give it that really authentic kind of look, because we're literally laying each brick down. We can have moss afterwards growing out of it. It gives you a lot of flexibility with the design. And just overall, I think it looks really cool. Now, we easily could have just carved this out of like a thin strip of styrofoam or something like that, but as I said, this just adds more realism to it, and I really want us to start stepping up this program and having you guys step up with us. So, we're just going to keep going like this, laying down the bricks, and when you're finally satisfied, you should get the following results. Ta-da! This is what our base will look like. We could scatter some more bricks around here if you like, but for now, I think this is workable. Next up, we're going to start working on the fences. For this one, we're going to take a coffee stir stick and chop it into quarters. Each piece is going to be about 4 inches in length, maybe 5 on occasion here, and the posts themselves will be about 1 inch in height. I'll probably do about 2 or 3 of these around the perimeter, but if you wanted to, you can go the entire length if you so choose. Of course, it is always dealer's choice. Once I have my posts here, I'm just going to use a little bit of hot glue, and these things will basically just sink in there, right? It's like a pin going into the styrofoam. It'll be fully anchored in place. For the actual wood-on-wood contact, though, you can use the white glue. I'm going to switch over to super glue, though, just so it has a really nice bonding here. Make sure you don't get it on the pink styrofoam or it'll just dissolve it. But other than that, it's pretty simple. Just lay them on here, give it a few seconds to dry, and our first fence post is finished. Once I have all the fences out of the way, I'm going to do something a little bit different here in the corner. I want part of the fence to look like it's been sort of blown in. So I've taken a small piece that's about 1 inch by 1 inch. I've cut it at an angle here. Be very careful when you're doing so, obviously. Make sure your blade's nice and sharp. I'm cutting it in different jagged areas, a little curve here and there. Fits nice in the corner. And again, this is just something I'm not going to do on all of them. I just wanted each piece to be a little unique. This one I'll put a bunch of rubble on it just to make it kind of an, draw the eye to here, I suppose. Right, pretty simple, nothing really complicated there, and we'll do a little bit more later on. Alright, now I'm going to take some of the leftover bricks that I have and just sort of scatter them around the base. Dealer's choice is always here on this one, just make it look kind of cool. Maybe part of the walls blown in, or some damage was taken. It's ancient city, it's going to be decrepit and really starting to show its age. So I'm just going to keep going here, putting these in random locations, and yeah, we'll just go from there. Alright, there's one pile. I might add some more later on, but yeah, I'm shooting from the hip on this. Alright, we're going to start working on the stairwell. For this one, it's going to be about 1 inch by 1 inch. And I'm going to carefully score it here so that I have a couple different steps. Then, extremely carefully here, slice in from the side. Make sure your blade is nice and sharp here. And watch out for your fingers here, folks. And just keep going back and forth, making these slow cuts. And there we got a really cool little stair. For some of these, I might do multiple staircases or do a much broader one. I've got one in mind. I'm going to do sort of a graveyard, crypt kind of thing, so that'll be a little bit bigger, more regal. But for this guy, I'm just going to do the bricks here, pencil them in real quick, and just go from there. Doesn't have to be overly complicated. Some of this is going to be hid, but we are putting the effort in, so we might as well try to do as much detail work as possible. I'm not sure if I'm going to put this one against the wall, or maybe I'll have it out a little bit. That's kind of the cool thing about this, is just improvising. But there's what the staircase looks like. Looks really good. And, yeah, so we could put it here maybe, or You know what? Let's actually put some handrails in there. So I'll leave a little bit of a gap so I can put the posts in. And we'll just make some wooden railings to sort of go along with this thing. That'll really make this pop out a bit more. Again, let's throw as much details in as possible. For this one, I'm going to make them about 1 inch at the highest point. The small one will be a 1/2 inch. And I'll probably use 1.5 inches in length. So just chop these in half here. And do a little dry run. Looks pretty good. So we'll stick the base one in first. Use the little hot glue gun. Again, we don't want to use super glue. If we do with any of the pink styrofoam, it's just going to dissolve it. And use the plier here. It wasn't quite the height that I want. So we just chip a little bit off there. No big deal. Chop it in. Make it a little bit sharper so it can dig into the black base. And other than that, it should be okay, especially once we get these posts in. That'll do a nice job bracing it, and it is actually relatively sturdy. So I'll do the same on this side. You'll notice that I'm doing them the same side here, just so that I can let the glue dry. I don't have to worry about it. All right, there we go. That looks pretty cool. Yeah, this is really coming together. I'm quite liking this. All right, now for the messy part. We're going to take some clear Elmer's glue. You can use white glue if you have it on hand here. And just carefully spread it around everywhere. It's all nice and gooey. I'm going to go in the corner here with that section that got sort of blown out. If you do get it on anything, don't worry about it too much, like any of the walls or what have you, because let's face it, this whole thing is just overrun and it's just decrepit. I don't think it really matters here. Now we're going to go in with some sand. We'll sprinkle that over everything. Again, doesn't matter if it gets on somewhere it's not supposed to. It's going to look pretty gnarly either way. But here is what our base is looking like. Yeah, look at that. We got some pretty cool detail here, folks. I'm digging it. I'm digging it. With the base out of the way, it's now time to start working on the actual structure. For this one, my wall sections here are 4 inches in length by 3 inches in height, while the side one is 2 inches in width and 3 inches in height. For the door frame, that's going to be 1 inch over, and it's going to be 1.5 inches high. It doesn't have to be overly complicated here, but I want enough for a figurine to go through it. And I want the window to be large enough that a figurine can see out of it and fire at their opponents with bows and arrows and such. Dealer's choice as always with these buildings, but if you're trying to keep up with what I'm doing at home, then those are the measurements. But as always, feel free if you've got something more grand in mind. Now, the other thing, too, is we're going to need 2 of these things. We'll need the bottom floor, and I plan to do an upper floor as well, so just make sure you bear that in mind. Now we're going to use some strips of balsa wood. It's pretty thin, and it's going to make a really nice panel lining here. Now, just, well, basically do the lining. It's simple as that. I'm going to use this as a trim, chop it off with a sharp blade when you're done, like so. And I'm just going to go around the outside. I'll need to do the interior as well. Since this is a blown out building, you do want to be able to see in there. So make sure you have plenty of balsa wood for this. And these are really handy too. These are like 75 cents, I think, for a big strip that's 1 meter long. So yeah, you could definitely say that I might have cleaned them out the last time I did my shopping trip there. Alright, we'll finish off the door frame here. Doesn't have to be overly complicated. If you want, you could even have fragments of the door still standing there. I'm keeping it pretty basic. Everything's going to be pretty open, just so the models, it's just easier for me to move. But by all means, if you want to do shutters or a blown out door, have at it. Alright, another theme that I'm going to have is this nice little lining, I guess, in the middle here, just to tie it all together, just to make it a little more interesting than just a blank wall. Again, dealer's choice. I did a couple mock-ups that were more like Victorian style, but for now, I'm just going to work on this one, do the same on the side panel, until I get something that looks a little bit like this. See, not overly complicated. I'll do the inside afterwards and go from there. Now, while the main walls are intact, and that's mostly for structural integrity, the back wall certainly is not. This one's still going to be 3 inches in height to keep the same consistency, but as you can see here, it's 1 inch by 1 inch. I scored lightly down the middle so I can bend it a little bit easier, and then I'm just going to town with the knife to make it look really jagged. This is definitely taking some damage, and it's just falling apart. Now, once I get the basic shape in place here, we're going to go in, we're going to make the same trim with the balsa wood. So I'll make a nice solid panel here for the corner. And again, this will give it a little bit more structural integrity. I mean, overall, it's a pretty solid build, but if you're using some heavier pewter models, you definitely want to have as much support as possible. The other thing too is I'm going to try to match the architectural design that I have with the rest of it. So there's going to be the panel that runs through the middle there, a little at the top, and it'll obviously be a little bit more broken, a little bit more jagged, but we still want to keep it consistent here. Despite what's happened to the city, architecture is still very important, ladies and gentlemen. We have to be consistent. So you can see here I marked it to match where the other ones were. Have a little broken off segment here. And let's glue that into place like so. And we'll do the same on the other. Yeah, there we go. So that's going to sit in the corner of the building like so. And I'll do the inside as well, and we'll go from there. Once I'm fully satisfied with wall segments, it's now time to bolt them into place on the smaller base that we worked on earlier. I'm going to first of all put these two pieces together. So use the hot glue gun here, bolt it down. And this one is not going to go all the way to the front. It's actually going to be right at the back. That way we have enough space for an overhanging balcony, slightly larger second story. We'll just make it look kind of cool. All right, so that's now firmly down. Do the same with our back piece here. And you can see on the ground, there's still plenty of space for the figurines to move around, and your fingers should be able to get in there without too much of an issue. All right, now it's time to start working on the second story. For this one, we'll get working on the floor here. We're going to match the base. That's going to be 3 inches by 4, or whatever size you happen to use. And we're going to just cut this out of a simple cereal box. Nothing too complicated with that. And we'll bolt that down, like so. All right, there we go. It's now time to use some support beams. These ones will be from other strips of balsa wood. These ones are a little bit thicker. And this is just going to hold this up, give us a little bit more structural integrity. Some of the other buildings I did cross beams. I tried to make it look a little bit more fancy. For this one, I'm just trying to keep it as basic as possible. I'm sure you guys get the idea where I'm going with a lot of this, so feel free to take what I've given you and just run wild with it. This one's going to require 3 of these. There's going to be an outside sort of a balcony area, and then the main structure itself is just going to be massive. Some of them I did a ridiculous proportion, but this one's actually not too bad. All right, as I mentioned earlier, we need to do the exact same wall segments that we did downstairs, so this is my second batch, just putting them into place. And I decided along the way I actually wanted some damage to the floor. So I've taken the blade here, I'm just puncturing through, and we're going to have the floor collapsing in. Just a nice little detail I thought would kind of look cool. Now I'm going to go with my coffee stir sticks, and these I'm going to lay down as the floorboards. Doesn't have to be overly complicated. You can do different patterns if you want. You can make it look really jagged and broken. These ones, I was trying to keep it relatively simple until I get to that blown out segments. Then some of them are going to, be bent into it to make it look like something heavy maybe fell through. Maybe it was one of the adventurers. Maybe it was a cannon. Who knows? This city's really gone to hell, let's just put it that way. It actually is kind of like Vancouver in a lot of ways. It's overpriced, it's ridiculous rental units, and there's junkies everywhere running around looking for green rocks. It's kind of like East Hastings without magic. But enough about my problems in life, let's keep building here. With the floor nearly done, let's put the wall into place here, just so we have sort of a marked area of where we gotta go to. We'll stick it right here. All right. Looks good, looks good. And now we're going to use these broken pieces, and we're going to start doing the outside deck. Now for this one, I'm just having them laying a separate way just to make it look a little interesting here. Obviously, you can do whatever design you want. You can do a hand railing if you want. I feel like the previous tenants in this place weren't really huge on safety regulations. Or I'm just being lazy right now. I really don't know the difference. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, and I've got a deadline to meet. All right, let's work on the floor here. This is the caved-in segment. This is just little fragments. I'm going to put them in there kind of willy-nilly. By the way, if you hear any noises in the background, that's probably my landlord doing some renos. Maybe he's inspired by these videos. Maybe he's a subscriber like all of you, because every single person watching this is obviously like, shared, and subscribe the video, right? Right? Come on, guys, don't leave me hanging here. Please tell me you've at least subscribed. Oh, that looks really nice. All right, this is really coming together here. All right, a couple more pieces here, and I think we'll be good with the general overall floor. Now, to make it look a little bit more interesting as well, I want there to be some debris. Nothing too crazy, because again, I want my figurines to be able to move without too much issue. But I feel like a couple fallen planks here and there, it probably will tie the whole thing together, more honest than not. So I'm going to just stick them here willy-nilly, and yeah, just looks kind of cool. Again, dealer's choice. Alright, time to start working on the roof now. For this one, I've used a little triangle. This is going to be 3 inches in length, and it's about 1.5 inches in height. And yeah, just a little bit of framing here, nothing too complicated. Just chop that in there and make sure the tip is a little bit more triangulated. I'll just chop it a little bit here. Make it nice and smooth. And that's going to sit on the top. Glue that into place. There is actually a little bit of an attic you can sort of see there. That's about 2 inches by 3 inches in length. And now we're just going to cover the whole thing with the roof. This one's going to be 4 inches in length, and it's going to be, let me just whip out the ruler here just so I can give you the exact measurements. One side is 2 inches in length, and the other's only 1.5. The reason being, I'm going to chop a little segment out so you can actually fit a figurine up there. We'll do the flooring on this segment, and, well, it's rinse and repeat as below. Just slap down your sticks, and that's about it. It doesn't have to be overly complicated. Yeah, I'm going to put a couple extra tiles later on, but for the most part, this is pretty straightforward. The roof's going to sit on there like that, and here's where I'm going to chop it. And this is where you'll be able to stick a figurine, like that. Okay, now for a little bit of a tedious task, we got to start making the tiles for the roof. This is just strips of cereal box, and I'm chopping them up into segments here. And we just got to slap them down one by one. Unfortunately, going through the footage here, I am missing a couple segments. You can see I basically just slapped them on like that. It's not overly complicated. You can check out some other videos where I've gone a little bit more in detail, but for the most part, just slap them down. There's a couple that are on the floor where they maybe fell through, but yeah, pretty straightforward, just a little bit time consuming, but overall, it's pretty straightforward, simple, and it looks good when it's done. Alright, as you can see here, this is what the full structure is going to look like. Obviously, you don't need the big base, but I just think it really ties the whole thing together. Yeah, I'm really happy with this piece. This looks really cool. With all the building out of the way, it's now time to start working on the painting segment. First off, you'll notice the entire piece has been covered with black paint, given ample time to dry before we start going into our first layer. This is going to be 3 parts black and 1 part white to make a very dark gray color. And this will get dry brushed over all the stone elements, any wall segments, and anything in between, like the little bits and rubble. You're going to do a pretty generous coat on here. A little bit of the black is still going to pop through here and there, but for the most part, it's going to be packed in relatively strong. If you do happen to get anything on the wooden elements, such as the beams or the roof or any of the dirt and earth, don't worry about it too much. It's just going to get dry brushed afterwards anyways. And vice versa, when you're working on those darker brown elements, don't worry about getting it on the walls or the pavement. This whole thing's meant to look old and decrepit and just ruined anyways, so out of all of our build, it's pretty forgiving. And once the first layer's done, it's going to look like that. Give it plenty of time to dry before working on the next coat, which is 2 parts black and 2 parts white for a medium gray color. Basically, rinse and repeat. We're going to go over all the segments that we've already done. And if you've ever watched my other videos, you'll know the lighter the color, the lighter your dry brushing is. By the time we finish the final layer, which can be in a lot of cases just pure white, it is basically nothing left in the bristles. This is a medium dry brushing here, so you can still see a little bit of what's left behind, but we're still giving a pretty solid color. When it comes to the wall segments, however, you'll notice I don't go quite all the way to the wooden beams. So as I'm getting lighter and lighter, I'm moving just a little bit away from the beams each time to show all the previous layers. This is a cool little technique that gives you a little bit of natural shadowing, and it takes a little bit of practice, but overall it's worth it once you start mastering it. With our second layer done, you're going to look at this. Alright, rinse and repeat here, people. Now we're doing 3 parts white to 1 part black for a lighter gray color. Dry brush it on everything. Here we go. Yeah, not really much more to say about this. It's pretty much the same technique I've used in a lot of my videos. I might start working on some different techniques, but I mean, if it's not broken, don't fix it. You know what I mean? Like, this works really good on doing any stone effects. Now, slightly off the record here, this is me sort of rambling here and just trying to fill up the bit of the space. I actually did come up with a technique for doing really cool rock. And it's basically you use a little bit of tan in there, and it just makes it look a little bit more organic. I'll probably do it in a later video. Maybe if you guys like it, we'll do a season 4. I still haven't really settled on if I'm going to do that or not. So let me know in the comments below. Do you want a season 4? Are you guys going to be down for that kind of thing? And maybe I'll show you how to paint rock. I know, it doesn't sound that exciting, but you know what? I'll make it pretty cool. But here we go. This lighter gray color is on pretty much everything here. This is what you're going to end up with. And we will move on. Alright, at this point, it is pretty much just pure white on my bristles here. I'm dry brushing very lightly. I'm focusing a lot on the edges. I don't want to go too crazy in the middle here. I'm doing it also in little patches. You can still see there are some pretty dark brown areas on that big slab. And other areas, it's a lot brighter. And that's just what you're going to get with using different rocks, right? Yeah, this looks great. All right, the base is finished. And we're going to do the exact same thing with the actual structure here. Once again, a little bit lighter. There's probably just a little bit of paint in the bristles. There's not a whole lot here. And we're just going to pack that in nicely. Pardon me. Yeah, not really much more to say on this one. Make sure you do the interior. On one of the buildings, I actually forgot to do part of the downstairs, so I had to go back retroactively and just fix it up. But no, this is looking pretty darn good. All right, there we go with that layer done. That looks really good. And this is what it looks like. Here's the base. All right. Let's put the two of them together. There we go. All right, with all those elements out of the way, it's now time to start working on all the brown elements. So this is going to be the dirt, the fence posts, the panel lining. This is going to be the rooftop, everything else, basically. This is pretty much a two-color build. It's either gray or it's brown. So all these elements are getting a pretty generous coat here of a dark cinnamon brown. If you have to use in a pinch, you can always just use some regular brown, mix it with a little bit of black to make a darker color, and pack it in there pretty solid, but you can still see a little bit of the black poking through. Now with this one, pack it in pretty heavy with the roof tiles here, pretty heavy with the floors, of course, because it's just solid panels of wood. And then when it comes to the actual trim and everything, I'm going to go a little bit more careful. You can see I'm using a very wide, fat brush for this one, for most of the dry brushing. And now I got to go in with a little bit smaller and detailed of a brush. I'm going to add a little bit more black to this one. And I'm going to go very carefully along all the trim here. It's very similar to what I did with the samurai videos you can check out here. Except in that one I was doing more crimson scarlets and rich reds. In this one I'm going to be doing different shades of brown. But the technique is pretty much exactly the same. Again, if you do happen to get any brown on any of the gray elements, don't worry about it too much. It's a grimy building. Don't sweat it. But when I get all of it done, because there's a lot of it, this is basically what it's going to look like. With that first layer down, it's now time to go in with some generic brown. Again, as always, give lots of time to dry in between the different layers. Nothing worse than trying to do a dry brush with a wet surface. Wet and dry brush do not go well together. That's pretty self-explanatory here. All right, dry brushing everything. Doing a pretty generous coat here. This time, I'm not as afraid, because there's not very much in my bristles here. I'm going to dry brush this over everything. I don't need to go in with a nice detailed brush, because again, if any of it gets onto any of the stonework here, it just makes it look a little bit more aged. And that's our second layer finished. All right, at this point, I've gone in with 1 part brown and 1 part golden yellow to make a nice kind of sandy golden color. This is going to get dry brushed in here relatively light. I don't want to go too crazy with this one, but you do notice a difference right away, especially with that dirt there and on these fence panels. Yeah, it's already making it pop out, but a little goes a long way. Yeah, that looks great. All right, and then the same thing, a little bit heavier on the roof tiles, obviously. It got a little bit more real estate. We can play around with that. Pretty heavy with the floorboards here and the broken columns. And overall, I'm not too scared to get any of this on the walls as well. It's slowly building up these dust layers, right? Like, that's literally what we're doing, is we're just throwing dust on the walls. It's giving it a slow, aged look. And I'm quite fond of this, actually. It looks really solid. So we'll finish off the rest of it here. Do a little bit on the side. A little bit on the interior here. And yeah, this is already looking cool. Like, you could call it here if you wanted. If that's what you like, go for it. But for me, I'm going to take the paint that I previously had, so the golden, yellow, and the brown. Now I'm going to add a little bit of white to it to make it a light sand color. And this is doing a very light dry brushing, but you can see the difference already. It really makes this stuff pop out. Like, look at the roof tiles here. Like, boom, that just adds a whole other element to it. It makes it look really worn down and aged, especially when I do it on the floorboards here as well. That looks fantastic. And this one, because it is a light sand color, at this point, I really don't care if I get it on the walls. Not that I'm aiming for the walls, but it's just like a little bit of it is inevitably going to end up there, but it doesn't really matter. It's just aging this thing. And yeah, that's really looking cool. Again, you could call it here. That looks fantastic. If you want to keep going, go for it. But if this is what you like, you can see with the base here, put them together, that already looks really cool. All right, but we're not done. I'm going to go in now with some generic brown, very, very light, and just dirty everything up. Little patches here and there, little dust, a little bit of mud. That's it. Now this next one is purely an artistic decision on my part because I'm trying to match the board that I've already got going, so a little bit of green vegetation wouldn't look out of place. But for you, if you want to keep this looking a little bit more urban, green might not really be the best thing. But for me, I think throwing a little bit of this on here just really makes it pop out. And once you knock off the excess here, like, look at that. I think it looks really cool. All right, to add a little bit more, I'm doing a little bit of little swamp water here and there. You can check out the episode I did on that previously. This is just clear Elmer's glue with a bunch of different paint colors in there, some contrast. I'm just putting them in little pools here and there. This is little collections of dirty water that have collected in the yard. Makes it look a little bit grimy. No real rhyme or reason to them. I'm going to spread them out a little bit. And it just adds a little element to it. Like I said, I just want this to really look, if not realistic, then at least believable. You know what I mean? So I'm spreading it out a little bit, little footprints here and there in the mud. Yeah, looks great. And for the final little bit here, we're going to go in with little tufts of grass. And I'm going to spread these around, a little bit coming out of the fence line here and there. Some of it's in the mud, some of it's coming out of the rubble and the ruins. Purely artistic choice as well. If you don't want to go through this step, I just think it looks really cool. And finally, the last part of the building, we're going to do a pretty generous coat of a watered down Agrax Earthshade across the entire structure. This is going to make everything look aged and decrepit. Especially, I'm going to do a little bit heavier dose on the floorboards and the roof just to really punch it in there. The walls are a very watered down amount. It makes it look streaky, grimy. That's why I said earlier, if some of the dry brushing with the browns gets on the gray elements, doesn't matter too much. We're going to make it look ugly anyways. Now, I know throughout this whole episode, I've been saying things like, this looks cool, or this looks great, and all this. And I genuinely mean that. I'm really happy with how this build has turned out. I'm very passionate about it. I think it's one of my finest works, and I've done a whole bunch of these. With that last layer, we're actually finished. There's what the structure looks like. Let's grab the base, put the two together, and see what this looks like. I've built 7 of these things in total. I really like this. This is fantastic. Here are all the different bases that I made. As you can see, I put the big slab in different positions. Some have larger staircases than others. Some have a little more elaborate. Same with the structures. Some are a little bit more elegant than others, but they all follow the same pattern. See there, I got a little blacksmith one, and I was really happy with that. You can put these pieces together like this, and you could put a really large structure in the middle if you wanted. It's totally modular in this regard. Here's two put together like so. Yeah, this is a really cool build, and I really hope you guys have been inspired. Look at all the detail work I put in there, the decrepit, the aging, all that good stuff. This was a really fun build. You can see here I've got the two completely separate buildings, but because they were using the same template, they went together really nicely in the end. With that said and done, we are now finished the City of the Damned. I am extremely proud of this work. I think it's some of the best stuff that I've come up with for a while, and I really hope this inspires you guys. With that said and done, we are finished Season 3 officially here. I know it's been a long in between different episodes, and I want to thank you all for your patience. And if you guys do want to see more episodes, if you guys want a Season 4, please let me know down below, for I am but a humble artist and your servant. Until next time, this is Mr. Waugh, signing off. Well, that has been today's episode. I really hope you guys liked it and maybe found some useful information in there. If you did, make sure that you hit the like, the share, and subscribe button down below, and please pass this around to all your friends. We're really trying to build the channel from the ground up. If there's anything that you want me to build in an upcoming episode, let me know in the comments down below, and maybe we'll be able to build it for you in the future. On that note, I've been Mr. Waugh from Mr. Waugh Media, signing off.